Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. The time is now 2 o'clock. And with that, I can say good afternoon and happy Lagla Omer to everybody. And thank you for joining us today for the next installment of American Sephardi Federation Institute of Jewish Experience Travels in Jewish History Virtual Lag BaOmer. Today's tour, like all tours, is powered by the Diarna Geo-Museum. Thank you all for joining us today. Today, in honor of Lag BaOmer, we will be conducting a virtual hilula to various places of pilgrimage across the Middle East and North Africa. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's guest speakers who will be sharing with us from their knowledge and experience and adding to our overall experience. Joining us from Israel is Dr. David Biton, Head of Jewish Studies at Ono Academic College and an expert on the Jews of North Africa in modern times and head of the Kulna organization. Joining us from Tunisia is Moche Uzan, the assistant to the chief rabbi and with origins in Jerba. Joining us from New York is Chrystie Sherman, a Diarna Geo-Museum researcher who has traveled extensively throughout the Middle East and beyond, including multiple trips to Jerba. Indeed, many of the photos we'll be seeing today are hers that she took a few years ago on the island. Joining us from New York is Jason Guberman, the executive director of the American Sephardi Federation and the founder of the Diarna Geo-Museum. I'm your host, Eddie Ashkenazi, Diarna researcher at the American Sephardi Federation. And with that, I say good afternoon to all our panelists and thank you for joining us today. So before we do jump into the virtual hilula, just a brief introduction as to what exactly is the Diarna Geo-Museum.
Welcome to the Diarna Geo-Museum. Diarna means our homes in Judeo-Arabic. It testifies to a shared history which the forces of hatred are actively seeking to erase by spreading ignorance and destruction across the region. In 2014, after seizing Mosul, Islamic State fighters made a public spectacle of destroying the tomb of Jonah. Across the region, Christians and other minorities are subject to the same persecution once reserved for Jewish communities. The threat against our common cultural heritage is unprecedented. We are in a race against time. Diarna is leading an effort to preserve the history of once vibrant communities. Every day, synagogues, schools, and community buildings that defined Jewish life across the Middle East and North Africa are decaying or being destroyed. Take this beautiful synagogue in Damascus. It is known as the site where the prophet Elijah anointed his successor. This was in 2010. This is now. Thanks to Diarna's efforts to capture the images, the artifacts, and the oral histories, over 1,200 sites have been identified and are now accessible online. Diarna is the first geo-museum of its kind. With the help of volunteers from across the region, including Arabs, Persians, and Kurds, as well as people of all religious backgrounds, an intense effort is underway to capture visual and oral histories before it is too late. In order to follow developments in real time, Diarna has set up a situation room to oversee digital mapping, traditional research, and field expeditions that cross into conflict zones to document the remnants of our shared cultural heritage. Here, in northern Iraq, we are rediscovering an entire Jewish village. The local elders remember the names of the families that lived there. Here, we see what remains of the synagogue in Accra. And in Saudi Arabia, we discover a complex of forts belonging to an ancient Jewish tribe which played a pivotal role in early Islamic history. Deep in the labyrinths of Sana'a, Yemen, we document the vestiges of Jewish presence despite the chaos of an ongoing civil war. In other countries, peaceful environments allow us to render the full beauty of preserved sites. Witness the striking elegance of the Haim Pinto Synagogue in Essaouira, Morocco. This is heritage worth preserving. At a time when extremists are on a rampage to destroy the past and spread ignorance, the Diarna Geo-Museum is on a mission to preserve, protect, archive, and project the knowledge, the history, and the cultures which together form our identity. Visit us online, contribute your knowledge, join the community, and begin the voyage. Diarna, into the past, on to the future.
Without further ado, let us begin. But before we go on a pilgrimage, we need to first understand, why are we going on a pilgrimage today? Why is today, the 18th day of Iyar, this year falling out on May 12th, a day to even hold a pilgrimage? Let me just make a note to all the participants. Please use the Q&A box to ask any questions. We will be answering questions throughout the course of today's webinar. Please use the Q&A box for any questions. So I guess the question is, why are we going on pilgrimage today? What is today? What is special about today? Indeed, if you look at the graphic on your screen, there is no holiday mentioned for the month of Iyar. While as Nisan and Sivan have Passover and Shavuot respectively, there is no holiday listed under Iyar. So why are we going on a pilgrimage today? So before we go on pilgrimage, let's learn a little bit about it. So we are currently in the period of Sefirat Omer, or the counting of the weeks between Passover and Shavuot. And to be exact, we're actually up to the 33rd day of the Omer. And that's why we're going on a pilgrimage for Lag BaOmer, Lag being 33 in Hebrew. But just because we happen to be in the period of Sefirat Omer, that doesn't actually, what does that have to do with us going on a pilgrimage? But rather, it's something unique about today that makes today a day of pilgrimage, something unique about being on the 33rd day of the Omer. So what happened on this day? According to tradition, Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, is a special day on the Jewish calendar for a few reasons. It is the day that the plague which killed the students of Rabbi Akiva ended, and it is also the day that Rabbi Akiva began to teach new students following the death of his former students. And it is also the day of death of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. All these three events took place on the 33rd day, making it special day of the Omer. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is known traditionally as the author of the Zohar, a mystical work full of secrets about God and the world. This book is so important to Jewish tradition that we celebrate its author on his day of death, or hilula. Hilula is synonymous with the Yiddish term yahrzeit that many people are more familiar with. The hilula of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is marked by visiting his grave in Meron and saying special prayers and lighting fires. Communities outside of Israel would visit the graves of their great rabbis and others who were known for their learning on this day. Additionally, it is customary among many Jews that once the 33rd day of the Omer has passed, it is permissible to get married, get haircuts, and listen to live music. In today's talk, we will visit places of hilula outside the land of Israel. The first site we will be visiting today is located in Asjan, Morocco. And I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, Dr. David Biton. So here we are, we're going to zoom into today's first site, the tomb of Rabbi Amram ben Diwan. Dr. Biton, thank you for joining us today. Dr. Biton, still there?
You have to switch on your microphone.
Try that. How's that working? Dr. Biton?
Hello.
Hello.
I spoke to myself. Hello, everybody, and הילולה שמחה לכולם, and בריאות לכל באי עולם. So I will talk about Rabbi Amram ben Diwan and his hilula. He has two hilulot, one in Tu B'Av and one in Lag BaOmer. He was died in Tisha B'Av, but Asjan community near Wazan in Morocco decide to make the hilula in Tu B'Av, that it's also holiday, but also in Lag BaOmer, because Lag BaOmer, as Ezra said, it's like the hilulot day for the old tzaddikim that we don't know about her death tarikh. How do you say tarikh?
Death date.
The death day. But Rabbi Amram ben Diwan was very important that they decide also in Lag BaOmer to celebrate his hilula, despite, her death day. Okay, so I want to start with my mother, a story from my mother, Masuda Biton. She came from a small village in Morocco, in Ouarzazate, in the south, and Rabbi Amram ben Diwan appeared to her in her dream and asked her to call the child to be born after him. However, in the week of the birth arrived to the city, to the village, Rabbi Yosef Avichatzira, who was very close to the family. After the dilemma, they decide to call him in the two names, Yosef Amram. Why did Rabbi Amram had such a status that a simple woman in the distance was Azat, 180 years after his death of Rabbi Amram ben Diwan, would call her son in his name? Rabbi Amram was one of the greatest shadarim. Shadar, it's a kind of ambassador of rabbis from the Holy Land to all the diaspora who came from the land of Israel to receive contribution to the Holy Land. He was born in Jerusalem in 7040 to a famous rabbinical dynasty with sources from Morocco, from the area of Wazan. The name Diwan is the name of the village, Diwan, in this area close to Tangier. He moved to Hebron and established a yeshiva in 1763. He was sent from Hebron to Morocco to raise funds to the Jewish settlement in Hebron. They were usually sent, the shadarim, the scholars, to impress the communities abroad that would contribute to the Jewish community. It also appears that Rabbi Amram's family, as I said, came from the village of Diwan near Tangier. In the letter appointment, in the letter of appointment, he is described by the sages of Hebron, Sinai ve'oker harim. It's a combination between tradition and original thinking. In Morocco, he established yeshiva in Asjan, the place that he was died. And after he finished collecting the donation, he returned to Eretz Israel. After 10 years, in 1773, he violated a rule in Hebron ruler and entered the cave of the patriarch, Me'arat HaMachpelah. It was forbidden for Jews to entry to the Me'arat HaMachpelah, and he do it. The Hebron sages smuggled him out, and he went on a second mission in Morocco. On this mission, he came to the Meknes to visit his friend, Rabbi David Hassin, the great poet of Morocco. Rabbi David wrote a poetry in honor of Rabbi Amram and his mission. We also know that in the same visit in Meknes, he carried the sermons in the synagogue of Rabbi Rafael Birdugo, and we know him as the Malach Rafael, one of the great rabbi in all the times in Morocco. When he want to finish his mission and return to Israel, the internal wars in Morocco began. Therefore, he could not return to Israel. Rabbi Yosef Pesas from Meknes reported us how his grandfather, Rabbi Zichri Mesas, had been hosting Rabbi Amram ben Diwan for 9 years in his home, and even accompanied him to Fez on his way to Eretz Israel. During his journey from Fez to Tangier, he was sick, and in the village of Asjan, near Wazan, and was buried there. I want to tell a story about the mercy of Rabbi Amram, who brought Rabbi Elazar Atiyah. When he was in Fez, a poor man who wanted to marry his daughter, but he didn't have enough money, he asked Rabbi Amram to help him. So Rabbi Amram gave him his cape, glima, to sell it to the wealthy people in the community to sponsor his daughter's wedding. In the book of Rabbi Elazar Atiyah, of course, we can read a lot of stories about many acts of miracles have been brought about Rabbi Amram in his life and after his death. After his death, Rabbi David Hassin wrote a poetry, but a kina, not piyut, a kina, like the poetries that we cry in Tisha B'Av, to his memory. In summary, Rabbi Amram ben Diwan is a symbol of the connection between the land of Israel and Morocco and the cultural relation between them. Unfortunately, we have not a lot of manuscript from Rabbi Amram. So, הילולה שמחה, and זכות רבי עמרם תגן בעדנו, אמן. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Biton. And what would a hilula by Rabbi Amram, what would it be like? What would people do there during the hilula, people who went to visit?
As we saw in the picture, this is the hilula in Wazan. First of all, food and music, because we want to be happy. And after that, we pray to the tzaddik and ask a question, everyone with his problem from the tzaddik. But we ask from the tzaddik that he will ask from the God. It's not, we believe that the tzaddik will do our asking, our question. There is a lot of poor men come to the hilulot. It's a good time for them to eat and be happy, listen to the music, but also to get money for all the year. So it's very, very, it's like Aliyah Laregel to the Bet HaMikdash, because we don't have a Bet Mikdash, we don't have the temple, we have a lot of synagogues all over the Morocco, and it's a good הזדמנות, opportunity to meet all the communities in the area. In the modern time, because the traffics, the good traffics, the hilulot became bigger and bigger, and it's amazing. Now in Morocco there is a lot of hilulot that thousands of people came from all over the world. So in Meron, not today, usually in Lag BaOmer, it is the greatest ceremony of the Jewish people, because there is 500,000 people in one day every year. We don't have any ceremony like this. So because of this, I compare it to the Aliyah Laregel, 3 רגלים.
Wow. Let's just take a look around the shrine and see what we see there. As we could see, with thousands of people coming, it's not a small space. And one thing to note is that around the tomb of Rabbi Amram ben Diwan are the graves, is the regular cemetery of Azjen and Wazen area more generally. So those are some of the graves you're seeing in the background of this panorama photo that was taken by Diarna researchers a few years ago. And
excuse me, Ezra, as we see, Rabbi Amram asked before he died not to build a matzeva. And the story, the legend tell that a few rich people built despite it, but it was broken because he didn't want that it will be a place for, avodah zarah, but there is a lot of miracles that was in the hilulot. Excuse me. And this guy that we saw in the picture, he's a Muslim, but he's the bodyguard of Rabbi Amram and the Bet Kvarot, and he know all the piyutim in Hebrew, and he know to sing it, and he know to take brachot to everyone in Arabic, in Hebrew, and this is his job. So he live from, and this is a phenomenon in a lot of graves of tzaddikim in Morocco.
yeah, exactly. And the Muslim caretakers, I believe, are something that they need their own session all about how these local individuals who they're not connected to the rabbis, because they're their rabbis, but over time, because of the connections that they had with their former Jewish neighbors, they sort of adopt this history as their own and care for it as its own, as their own. As we could see, many candles were burned at the shrine over the years. We could see the wax flows down the rocks. And let us not forget to thank the caretaker on the way out, who so graciously opened the site for us.
This is the man.
This is the man. Thank you so much, Dr. Biton. And
Thank you very much.
Continuing along North Africa, we're going to take a quick hop, jump, and a skip, and we're going to go visit the island of Jerba, and perhaps its most famous synagogue, the El Ghriba synagogue. But before we visit the synagogue, I would first like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Moche Uzan, and I would like to say, Moshe, thank you for joining us today.
You are welcome, and Chag Sameach to everyone who is joining us.
Thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about the community on the island of Jerba.
So Jerba, it's an island in the south of Tunisia, not far from Libya. It's 10 times larger than Manhattan, and with 10 times less people. And there is a Jewish community there for, we think they are there for thousands of years. It's a very old Jewish community, like the Jews from Yemen. And so they have been there for a long time. And it's a very special community because they speak Arabic. They never left the island. There were never more than 6,000 Jews there, but they are still there after, even if everyone left around in Tunisia. Jerba is almost the last Jewish community in Tunisia.
And so if somebody was to go to the island today, as Chrystie did a few years ago, what would they see on the island? How many people live there today? Are there schools? Are there synagogues? How many people live there?
So you have the island. It's a very warm and touristic place, and you have two Jewish ghettos in Jerba. The big one called the Hara Kbira, and the small one Hara Zira. And the big one, they have around like 17 synagogues. They have 2 yeshivas. As you see in the picture, there are very young Jews, because 40% almost of the Jewish community is under 18. And like families, they have like 5, 6, 7 children. And they also lately built a school for girls. They didn't have school for girls. Usually they got married and that's it. Now they are evolving, and they created a school for girls, and they have around 150 girls studying now in the Jewish community of Jerba. They have 2 butchers. It's a very special community. I give you one little example. The Jewish community, they need to raise money for to keep the synagogues and everything. So they have a tax on the kosher meat. For every kilo of meat, 1/8 of the money goes to the kupa of the Jewish community.
And what do they use that money for?
To pay the rabbis, to keep the synagogues, because they have 400 young people, so they have to pay the rabbis of the yeshiva, of the kindergarten, and the school of the girls.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah. And with that little bit of background, I think we could actually make our way into one of perhaps the most famous synagogues on the island. And I'd like to now turn to Chrystie Sherman, the Diarna photographer whose photos we're looking at here, and ask her, Chrystie, what is the history of this synagogue?
Okay, I'm going to tell you, but I see that Jason is already there. He's in the sanctuary. Okay, El Griba, is in the area of Hadasagira that Moshe was talking about. We find the UNESCO protected El Griba, a synagogue with a long history and many legends, and believed to be the oldest in North Africa. Its history is quite unusual. And because of its insular situation on the small island, it has been able to keep its heritage rich and original over the millennium. In my research, I recently discovered or learned that there exists a letter that indicates that in 1647, El Griba was officially inaugurated. Okay, so the synagogue has been reconstructed and renovated over the centuries on the same spot where a 6th century synagogue existed. The interior today is clearly that of 19th century Jerbian style, with its beautiful blue tile work and arches. The exterior we can go back, Ezra. The exterior is unusually simple, not letting off what beauty lies inside, which I think is like a very, very beautiful aspect of visiting El Ghriba, is just the gorgeousness of what you're not anticipating. Today, the space is defined by an eruv, which seems essential after we understand the term Ghriba, which means the isolation synagogue, which is relevant when considering the two closely knit Jewish neighborhoods, Hada Segira and Hada Kabira. Okay, so according to one tradition, the beginnings of the synagogue is thought to be connected to the establishment of the earliest Jewish settlement on the island by a group of Kohanim priests from Jerusalem. Supposedly, they settled on the island soon after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE, and the tradition has it that these refugees brought with them a door and a stone from the altar of Solomon's temple. Even today, one can see a stone that is incorporated in one of the arches and which is alleged to be the original stone. We know it's not, but okay. The first Jewish settlement of Kohanim was later called Hada Segira, which means small village in Judeo-Arabic. There is an additional legend that explains the importance and the sanctity of El Ghriba synagogue. The story goes that the current synagogue was erected in the first half of the 19th century on a place that previously was occupied by the cabin of a mysterious, modest, and solitary young woman that had never been accepted by the inhabitants of the island. Only when she died in a fire that consumed her hut, but not her body, did the Jews of Jerba understand that she was a saint and buried her in a cave that later became the synagogue site. As for the legend of the outsider, it also seems to have local basis. The synagogue of El Ghriba is used by Jews, but also honored by Muslims. So it is also linked to the cult of saints in Islamic lands. And the very situation of the synagogue in the countryside shows the influence of Muslim culture.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so you've visited the synagogue at least twice to photograph it. And the synagogue, as we could see from these photos, it's a bit of an interesting space to photograph because of all the light coming in from all the various angles and the archways. So tell me a little bit about what it's like to actually take photographs inside this building and to try to preserve the architecture and the history of the site.
Well, you know, when I look back, I've actually been to Tunisia 3 times, and I hope it's not my last time because I think the island is just incredibly interesting. And as a photographer, you can't go wrong. It has everything. It has light, it has beauty, it has architecture, it has history, it has Jewish communities, and the problems that I had when I was there working on my photography book, on my book of portraits, is that it's very, very hard to get permission to shoot people. And I think the reason for that is because, well, the rabbis don't want anybody interfering and taking photographs. The husband don't want to have their wives photographed. The wives are worried that their husbands are going to be upset. And a lot of the women are worried that after they're dead, where will their picture be? You know, so I tried to reassure them that it wouldn't end up on Instagram or Facebook or someplace like that. So I tried very much to, you know, to spend time. Like I was in Jerba for maybe 10 days or a week, And that is how you are able to, you know, get into the get into their families, become known, have them see you day after day, and then they kind of warm up and allow you to take their portrait. And this is true with this man. I saw this man on every trip that I took to La Griba. He's always there. He prays all day long with his many other guys that are there, and they don't mind having their photograph taken. So when I was visiting many times La Griba, I would just take lots of photographs, and when you take lots of photographs, you get lucky, and many of them are fantastic. And you can't go wrong. I mean, the subject matter is incredible. The lighting is amazing, the architecture, what he's doing, it's profound. So I'm always happy to be there.
Well, that's wonderful. We do have a few more photos to get through. So here is a wall of plaques, dedicatory plaques donated to the synagogue over time, arranged a little bit as a display. But we're visiting La Griba today because of what they do there for Lag BaOmer. So Moshe, turning back to you, can you tell me a little bit about the Lag BaOmer celebration that would take place in the synagogue? Who takes part? Who organizes it?
The room that we see now with the candles is a little room inside the synagogue. And when you enter that room, you have to take off your shoes. We think that it's the oldest place of the synagogue and the most important place. So people get there, they take off their shoes, they light candles, they pray. It's very warm, it's very crowded, and people, the atmosphere is very religious atmosphere, and people stay there for hours to pray, and then they go out from the synagogue on the left side of the site to this place where they gather, and then and there it's completely different. It's people sing, people eat, people drink. So you have the materialist part, and you have the spiritual part on the other side. And it's very, very joyous. Many people, thousands of people come for the pilgrimage. 1,000 from Durban and more than 1,000 from abroad.
Wow. And so, Chrystie, you were there. You were lucky enough to be there one Lag BaOmer.
I was.
And,
yeah.
What was your experience like? You were coming from New York, and here you are. You're in Jerba, and there's a celebration happening.
Well, there are a lot of people, and I was used to seeing a lot of people. But you know, having been on the island for a week before this, you know, it's very quiet, and it was astonishing to see this pilgrimage. So this is what my thoughts are about it. My second trip to Jerba was in 2009, and it coincided with the famous this pilgrimage of Lag BaOmer. Jerbian Jews who have emigrated out to France and Israel and other destinations, they returned for a week to commemorate the death day of Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes and the remembrance of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and spend time with family and friends. Many hundreds, as Moshe said, descend, well, he said thousands, but many hundreds descend on the synagogue, which is turned into a sacred and vibrant space for the entire day, with candle lighting and much passing around of food and traditional bucha, which is a very strong eau de fig. They do a lot of the celebrating, not just outside, but also in the large room, in the large sanctuary. And we don't have any images of that up on the screen, but it's really fantastic. I've never seen anything like it. So there is also a very beautiful special tradition for women, which is to leave eggs with the name of young unmarried girls inscribed on them. So, you know, each woman goes home before the pilgrimage and they make eggs for their friends. So they put them in the recess underneath the ark. I believe that's the right place, that marks the spot where the body of the girl was supposedly found, and this area is known as the Cave of the Girl. So the eggs have been left near the warmth of the candles for the duration of the festival, and are later returned to the unmarried girls, who, after eating the eggs, would be sure to soon find a bridegroom. That's a really fantastic story. So I just want to say, for me, because this is really an important aspect for me of just being in Jerba. There are so many legends and mythologies tied to the island that make it quite magical. Homer's Odysseus was the first to wash up on the island shores and stayed for 7 years after hearing the call of the sirens. But these days, the island is inhabited with Jews, Arabs, Muslims, and Berbers. And perhaps not unlike Morocco, the mystery of Jerba's permanence has been in their coexistence, despite different languages and religions. They are both people of the book, the Torah and the Quran, and it is hard sometimes to tell them apart in the marketplace.
Wow. Thank you so much, Chrystie, for sharing those thoughts with us. And thank
You're
you,
very
Moche, for joining us and telling us a little bit about the island and its history.
Thank you. I wanted to add just one thing. During the pilgrimage in Lag BaOmer, there are also ambassadors and ministers from Tunisia that come there to assist, to attend the pilgrimage, to show a very good image of Tunisia. And you have Jews and non-Jews also attending the pilgrimage.
So it's very similar to Morocco, like we were learning about the caretakers, the Muslim caretakers of the Jewish shrines who know the Barachot. It seems like we have a similar phenomenon in Jerba as well. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Proceeding along, our next stop today is going to be very far from the Mediterranean shores of Tunisia. We're going to take a trip to southern Iraq near the Iraqi city of Basra. According to tradition, a little bit north of the city of Basra lies the tomb of Ezra the scribe in the city of Uzair. Like other shrines in Iraq, this shrine was visited periodically during the year, and especially on the holiday of Shavuot, the holiday of the pilgrimage. In Baghdad, Lag BaOmer was celebrated in different synagogues with candlelighting ceremonies and special songs about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But in more distant communities, or those closer to famous shrines, people would visit the shrine and have a celebration there. One foundational question to ask, though, is, Ezra the scribe led the Judean exiles from Babylon back to Jerusalem after the destruction of the first temple. What is he doing buried in southern Iraq? Theoretically, he should be buried in the land of Israel. The answer may lie in a Yemenite tradition, which states that Ezra was buried in Iraq as a punishment for him prohibiting the Yemenites to return to Jerusalem. Be that as it may, the site has a religious significance no matter who is buried there. So let's take a look inside. Here's an archival photo of the shrine. The shrine can be identified via the dome on top of the shrine, and it is the dome, the size and shape and color of the dome, which separates and makes it easy to differentiate the tomb of Ezra from different shrines in southern Iraq and in Iran. For example, the tomb of Ezekiel, the tomb of Daniel. The site along the river, and some historians posit that had there been an ancient shrine, the changing course of the Tigris River over the centuries would have washed the original building away. The shrine currently extant dates to about the 19th century. The site was visited by Jews and Muslims, and here's a photo from 1947 of Naim Cohen and his brother and his friends visiting the shrine. Thank you to Mr. Ian Cohen, who watched our previous webinar on Iraq, for sharing this photo with us and allowing me to use it today. The shrine is still there, and it is still there, and it has been kept up by the local community. And here we are in the entrance to the shrine, and we can actually see the Hebrew plaques are still in place above the doorway to the room which contains the sarcophagus of Ezra. And here we are inside the room itself, and we can see that his grave, his burial container, is covered in green in the manner of Muslim holy men. The actual box underneath the green cloak is adorned with Hebrew inscriptions. There is still a Hebrew plaque on the wall of the burial room, and there is additionally still Hebrew on the ceiling of the room as well. Both are still there, and both will hopefully still be there for the future to come. The synagogue, there was also a synagogue in the shrine compound, which would host prayers and other gatherings during the course of the year, and especially during the pilgrimage. Our final site for this afternoon is the tomb of Daniel in Shush, Iran. Daniel the prophet was active during the 6th century before the Common Era during the Babylonian Empire. His tomb is located in the city of Shush, similar to the Hebrew Shushan, the setting of the Book of Esther and parts of the Book of Daniel. It should be noted that many other cities lay claim to having the tomb of Daniel in them, such as Mosul, Kirkuk, and Samarkand, Uzbekistan. Which city actually has it? That's up for the cities to decide, but it can be said that each community did act with reverence to the local tomb in their midst. The site is mentioned by the medieval travelers Benjamin of Tudela and Petachia of Regensburg, and the current structure dates to the second half of the 19th century. Here is an Italian postcard from about 1975 showing the tomb and the compound. Like many other tombs throughout Iraq and Iran, there is a large courtyard which needs to be traversed before actually entering into the shrine. At the far end of the courtyard, we have the foyer, the vestibule, which takes us into the shrine compound. Here we are, we're getting closer to getting inside. Here we have the hallway, we're still almost there. And finally, we've made it to the room containing his burial container. As we can see, there is a little bit of Arabic on the rim around his burial container. And here is another view of showing it in close-up. And the shrine is and was visited by Iranian Jews throughout history, as well as by Iraqi Jews from southern Iraq, for whom this was just a quick hop, skip, and a jump away. And with this, our tour comes to an end. I would like to once again thank our panelists for sharing from their time and wisdom with us today. I invite all those watching to please stay tuned for information about future tours, one of which will be to Iraqi Kurdistan to visit the tomb of Nahum before the holiday of Shavuot. And I invite everybody to visit the website for the Institute of Jewish Experience, that's instituteofjewishexperience.org, to see their upcoming classes and lectures. I do see here that we have some questions in the Q&A box. So I would like to answer those before we conclude today. So just hang on one second. Okay, I have here a question from Fanny Foreman. Was his name Amram Rachamim? I believe, Dr. Biton, that's a question for you. Is it about your brother, perhaps, or about the rabbi? Amram Rachamim? You're still muted, hang on. Wait, you're still muted.
Okay. What is the question?
Somebody is asking, was his name Amram Rachamim? I'm not sure if that refers to the rabbi or to your brother.
No, the name is Amram, Rabbi Amram ben Diwan. Her father was Rabbi Ephraim ben Diwan. His uncle was Rabbi Yehuda. I don't. My brother is Yosef Amram. It's the two names of the two tzaddikim, one Rabbi Amram and one Rabbi Yosef Abu Chatzira.
Got it. So there's no Amram Rachamim there.
No.
Not a problem. Claire Cohen asked how lag means 33 in Hebrew. So in Hebrew, there is a concept called gematria, and basically it assigns a number value to all the letters. So the letters 1 through 10 are all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then all the letters beyond 10 are all on multiples of 10. So for example, there's 10, 20, 30, and you can create numbers by combining something from the tens column and something from the ones column. And so Lamed is the equivalent of 30, and Gimel is the equivalent of 3. And when you combine them together, that is Lag BaOmer. So basically saying the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag is what 33 vocalized sounds like. I have a question from I. Wolfman. What is the date of the construction of the current tomb of Daniel? It looks modern. Date of construction for the tomb of Daniel is in the 19th century, most likely the second half of the 19th century. Unfortunately, for some of these shrines, it's a little difficult to get very good dates on construction, especially because like the Griba synagogue, it's construction over construction over construction. Michelle Bashian regarding fire and Lag BaOmer. Unfortunately, fire regulations prohibit us from having a fire on display over Zoom. I don't think my computer will survive. Eli Gabai, how far from Agdez? How far is Azjan or Wazain from Agdez?
I don't remember where is Agdaz. So if there is, Wazan, it's between Fez, Meknes, and Tangier. It's it's the Spanish area of in the north of Morocco. I think Agdaz, I don't remember, maybe in the south. I can.
Okay. Not a problem. I have a question for you, Moshe.
Yes.
Are Jewish people allowed to visit Jerba today? I'm not sure if today means in times of Corona or even without Corona.
No, without Corona, everyone is allowed to visit Jerba. It's not related to the religion, but Israelis are not allowed to visit Tunisia. But during the Griba pilgrimage, they have special authorization.
Okay. And are special visas required for Americans?
Americans, they can come anytime to visit Tunisia.
Okay, so anybody interested in going to Tunisia once the whole Corona thing dies down, by all means, highly recommended. Okay, so another question for you, Moshe.
Yes.
Is the feast celebrated this year? And also the current Minister of Tourism of Tunisia is from Jerba.
Okay, so so this year we are not doing the pilgrimage because of the coronavirus. But it's true, Mr. René Trabelsi he's not anymore. He was in the previous government. He was the Minister of Tourism. And his father, he's the one who organized every year the Griba pilgrimage. And René then became the Minister of Tourism in Tunisia in the previous government. He has been sick from the virus for the last month, and we wish him a fast recovery.
Yes, refuah shelema bekarov to him and all those who are sick. Doctor, there is a question here. The significance of fires to Lag BaOmer. So the question is, can we explain the significance of fires or s'mores to this holiday? S'mores I'm not sure about, but there's definitely an aspect of fire. The bonfires are a big part of Lag BaOmer celebrations. So fire is often, the Torah is often compared to fire, and we're celebrating the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, one of the major innovators and authors of a major work, and that is one reason we make a fire. We also make, what else do we make fires? Dr. Biton, fires on Lag BaOmer.
There is a legend about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai when he was with his friends, all the rabbis. It was a fire that around them. And as you said, the Torah, the metaphor to the Torah is a fire. So there is, I think, another explanation that when there was, like in the hilula, like in the Bet HaMikdash, that they were dancing with the fire. So there is a few explanations. About Agdaz and Agdaz, it's close to my parents' village, Warzazat. So it's approximately 700 kilometers from Wazan.
Okay, that is not close. I have a question, Moshe, back to you.
Yes.
What makes Judaism in Tunisia still alive, despite the fact that the community is very small?
Still alive is a very big thing, because there used to be more than 100,000 Jews in Tunisia in the 50s. Now we have only 1,500. The thing is, Jerba is special because they all live in one specific area in the Jewish ghetto. They are all religious, so they don't get assimilated, and that's why the community is not becoming very big, but it's stable. They are staying around 1,000 for the last 20 years. It's always the same number.
Interesting. I have a question. David Amram, was he Jewish?
David Amram?
Yes, I believe he's a musician.
Maybe the name, the family name Amram, it could be from Yemenite or from Iraq. Amram in Morocco, it's a private name, not a family name.
Okay, so I guess the answer to that one is we're not sure.
Yes.
So at this point, I'd like to ask our panelists for any final thoughts before we close out today's meeting. And I would like once again to thank you all for joining us today to share from your knowledge and your wisdom with us. So Chrystie, any final thoughts before we close out?
You know, I just wanted to say something about the fire, because I know that there are many bonfires and related fires that go on during the pilgrimages, but it's also interesting to remember that at La Griba, there's an additional fire element, which is the fact that the young woman was in a fire and her house burned down, but she didn't, and she was sort of made into a little saint. So I think the idea of fire, at least for women, it takes on a special meaning.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Moshe, any final thoughts before we close out today's panel? Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, and I also learned a lot today. So it was a pleasure, and anytime.
You're welcome. David, any last thoughts before we close out today?
בזכות כל הצדיקים ובתפילה לקדוש ברוך הוא שתעבור הקורונה מן העולם.
Amen.
Amen. So one last thought before we do close out. Philip Foster asked, how often do we do these online tours? Online tours happen every 10 days to 2 weeks or so. If you're looking for more information about the tours, please visit AmericanSephardi.org, or you can visit instituteofjewishexperience.org, and please sign up there for our mailing list. This way you can stay up to date on all the different happenings of the American Sephardi Federation. So once again, it's Institute of Jewish Experience, and as well as the Diarna Geo-Museum, which is diarna.org, and the American Sephardi Federation, which is americansephardi.org. You can go there, info at all those various email addresses will get us right to us. Thank you to everybody once again. Thank you for watching, and a Lag BaOmer Sameach to everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.